Worry is not simply a fleeting emotion. It's the mind's desperate attempt to impose order where none can be guaranteed. We worry because we believe somewhere deep within that if we think long and hard enough, we might prevent disaster. That if we replay possibilities in our heads endlessly, we'll find the one path that keeps us safe. But this belief is a trap. Worry doesn't protect us from chaos. It multiplies it within us. The more we try to predict the unpredictable, the more our minds tighten into knots of confusion and fear. We call it being careful or being responsible, but in truth, it's often a subtle form of rebellion against the reality of limitation, against the truth that life is uncertain and that control is never absolute. The human mind is wired to seek patterns, to find meaning, to impose logic on the unknown. That instinct has built civilizations and advanced our understanding of the universe. Yet the same instinct, when overextended, becomes destructive. When you extend your need for certainty beyond what is possible, worry becomes your constant companion. It feeds on your imagination in painting endless pictures of what could go wrong. The mind, instead of being a servant of clarity, becomes a tyrant of speculation. It whispers, if you stop worrying, something bad will happen. And so you keep worrying, as if anxiety itself were a form of protection. But what it protects you from is not danger, it protects you from peace. At the heart of worry lies a false assumption that the world revolves around your capacity to manage it. We think our constant mental vigilance holds everything together. It's almost as if we believe that if we let go for a moment, everything will collapse. That illusion is intoxicating because it feeds our ego. We want to believe that our lives depend entirely on our own strength. But such belief is exhausting and it always fails. Life inevitably reminds us that no amount of planning or fretting can stop loss or illness or uncertainty. You can lock every door, double-check every detail, and still find yourself face to face with the unexpected. This realization can break you or it can free you. When you finally see that worry is just the mind's way of pretending it's God, you can begin to let go. Letting go is not resignation, it's acknowledgement. It's saying, I will act with integrity and wisdom. I will not live as if the entire weight of existence depends on me. This is not weakness, it's maturity. It's the point where human effort meets divine trust. The paradox is that true peace doesn't come from having everything under control. It comes from accepting that you never will. When we place every burden in God's hand, we are not abandoning responsibility. We are recognizing the proper boundaries of human responsibility. We still work, we still care, we still strive to make things better, but we stop trying to play the role of the infinite. We let the infinite be infinite. And something extraordinary happens then. The mind, once restless and knotted with fear, begins to find quiet. You start to see that peace was never out there waiting for life to calm down. It was always within you, buried under layers of control and fear. To stop worrying doesn't mean to stop thinking or planning. It means to stop worshiping your own anxiety as if it were your savior. It means to trust that there's a higher order moving beneath the chaos, one that doesn't depend on your constant supervision. When you realize that, you begin to live differently. You speak with calm, you act with confidence, and you rest in the knowledge that you are not alone in holding the world together. The mind that once rebelled against uncertainty finally bows in humility, and in that surrender finds freedom. We live under the illusion that we are in control, that our intelligence, effort, and vigilance can shield us from the unpredictable nature of life. This illusion is comforting because it gives us a sense of power, feeling that we can bend reality to our will if only we plan well enough or try hard enough. But the truth is far more humbling. We are limited creatures. We are fragile. The line between stability and chaos is much thinner than we like to admit. One phone call, one diagnosis, one moment of chance, and everything we thought was secure can shift beyond recognition. Yet we persist in the fantasy that if we worry hard enough, prepare thoroughly enough, or push ourselves endlessly, we can somehow control the uncontrollable. That belief is not strength. It's arrogance disguised as responsibility. When we live under that illusion, we begin to shoulder burdens that were never meant for us. We feel compelled to fix everything, to manage not only our own lives, but the lives of others, the outcomes of events, even the course of fate itself. We live as if the world rests on our shoulders. But that kind of self-imposed omnipotence only leads to exhaustion and despair. We are not built to carry the weight of the infinite. And yet we try day after day, believing that letting go would be failure. The deeper tragedy is that we mistake surrender for weakness when, in reality, it is the only form of strength that can withstand the storms of life. Human limitation is not a curse, it's a design. It's the very boundary that defines who we are and allows meaning to exist. You cannot be everything, control everything, or know everything, and that's precisely why faith matters. When we recognize our limits, we create space for something greater than ourselves to act. We stop demanding that life conforms to our expectations and start aligning ourselves with the deeper rhythm of existence. A rhythm that is often mysterious, never meaningless. In that moment of humility, something inside us shifts. The fear that once dominated us begins to dissolve because we no longer believe we must control every outcome to survive. This is not to say that effort is unimportant. Effort is noble and necessary. We are called to act, to create order, to take responsibility for what is within our reach. But there is a vast difference between acting responsibly and trying to play God. Acting responsibly means doing your part with sincerity and wisdom, then releasing the result. Trying to play God means believing that if you just think harder, work longer, and worry more, you can dictate reality. The first path leads to peace, the second leads to madness. Recognizing human limitation is an act of humility, but it's also an act of courage. It takes courage to admit that you are not in full control, that you depend on something higher, that there are forces at work beyond your comprehension. That admission doesn't shrink you, it frees you. It frees you from the unbearable weight of trying to sustain a universe you didn't create. It allows you to breathe again, to live again, to hope again. When we place every burden in God's hand, we are not retreating from life, we are standing within it with clarity and strength. We are acknowledging that while we can build, we cannot command the outcome, we can plan, but we cannot dictate the future. This realization doesn't make life easier, but it makes it more bearable, more honest, more sacred. It's in that surrender that true peace begins, not the peace of having everything under control, the peace of knowing that you are held even when everything else falls apart. In that stillness, you finally understand that control was never the goal. Trust was. Placing your burdens in God's hand is not an act of blind submission. It's a deliberate, conscious surrender rooted in understanding rather than ignorance. Faith, when genuine, is not a denial of reason but an extension of it. It's the point where logic meets limitation and chooses trust instead of despair. Many people think faith means refusing to think, but real faith begins where thinking reaches its limit. It's the recognition that while we can analyze, plan, and act, there remains a vast realm of uncertainty that our intellect cannot conquer. To place your burdens in God's hand is to admit that your strength has boundaries and that those boundaries are not your prison, they are your path to peace. This surrender is deeply psychological. When you trust that meaning exists beyond your immediate comprehension, you free yourself from the tyranny of needing every answer right now. You no longer spiral into endless questioning or self-blame when life takes an unexpected turn. You start to understand that not knowing is not the same as being lost. Faith gives you a place to stand when the ground beneath you shakes. It doesn't promise that you'll never fall. It promises that falling will not be the end of you. It teaches you to stop fighting every uncertainty as an enemy and to start seeing it as an invitation to grow in courage and humility. Such faith doesn't tell you to sit idle while the world collapses. It tells you to act with integrity and courage. Then let go of the obsession with results. It transforms your effort from a desperate grasp for control into a calm expression of trust. You still work, still strive, still carry your responsibilities, but without the frantic edge of fear. You begin to live with a kind of sacred detachment, knowing that your role is to act faithfully, not to command outcomes. This is the paradox of faith. In letting go, you discover a deeper strength. When you place your burdens in God's hand, you don't shrink from life, you engage it more fully. You stop living as if you are the master of destiny and begin living as a participant in something vast, purposeful, and divine. That's not surrender in the weak sense, it's surrender in the strongest possible sense, the kind that sets your soul free. To trust in God does not mean to abandon responsibility or retreat into passivity. It means to act with full intention while understanding that the outcome is not yours to control. There is a profound difference between being responsible and being burdened by the illusion of total responsibility. When you live as though every outcome depends solely on you, you begin to suffocate under the weight of your own expectations. You become trapped in anxiety, constantly judging your worth by success or failure. But when you act with faith, when you give your best and leave the rest in God's hands, you discover that responsibility can coexist with peace. You are no longer paralyzed by fear of what might go wrong. Instead, you are strengthened by the conviction that even if things do go wrong, they can still serve a greater purpose. Faith doesn't erase struggle, it refines it. It teaches you to keep moving forward even when the path isn't clear, because you believe that meaning exists beyond what you can see. You begin to understand that your duty is to do what is right, not to manipulate outcomes. That understanding frees you from despair, because your effort is no longer chained to success alone. It's grounded in obedience, in integrity, in doing your part while trusting that God is weaving the rest together. This shift changes everything. Work becomes an offering, not an obsession. Challenges become opportunities for growth, not punishments. Failure becomes a teacher, not a sentence. When you see life through that lens, responsibility transforms from a heavy weight into a sacred calling. You realize that you were never meant to carry the entire world, only your part of it. And that is enough. To live in faith is to live responsibly within your human limits while resting in divine assurance beyond them. It's to say, I will do my part with courage and honesty. I will not destroy my peace trying to control what belongs to God. This mindset doesn't make you careless. It makes you focused. You stop wasting energy on things outside your reach and start pouring it into what actually matters. Despair comes when effort feels meaningless, when your work seems swallowed by uncertainty or failure. But faith redeems that effort by giving it purpose. Even when results are hidden, it reminds you that no honest act, no sincere struggle, no moment of perseverance is wasted when placed in God's hands. It all becomes part of a story much larger than your own understanding. In that story, even your setbacks carry significance. So take responsibility, but not beyond your rightful share. Strive for excellence, not control. The peace that comes from that balance is unlike any others. You begin to live with clarity, strength, and humility. You act with determination but sleep with calm, because when you finally learn to trust that outcomes rest with God, you stop living like a desperate architect of perfection and start living like a faithful builder of meaning. And that, ultimately, is where true responsibility meets peace. There comes a moment in every person's life when the weight of worry becomes unbearable, when sleepless nights, racing thoughts, and the constant urge to control everything begin to consume this soul. It is in that moment that you are faced with a choice: either continue to clutch every fear as if it were your duty to solve it, or finally place those burdens in God's hand. That act of release is not weakness, it is transformation. It's the moment when the human spirit stops fighting against the limits of its own strength and allows grace to step in. The paradox is that letting go doesn't make you powerless. It reveals the power you were meant to live with all along. When you hand over your fears, You are not escaping reality. You are meeting it honestly. You are acknowledging that fear exists, that life is uncertain, and that suffering is inevitable. But you are also declaring that fear will no longer dictate how you live. You begin to see that the purpose of faith was never to remove struggle, but to transform how you face it. Instead of collapsing under the pressure of every hardship, you start to rise through them. The difference is subtle yet profound. The same storm that once paralyzed you now becomes a teacher, a purifier, even a source of courage. This transformation doesn't happen instantly. It begins quietly in the small moments when you choose to trust rather than panic. It happens when you breathe deeply instead of spiraling, when you pray instead of overthinking, when you choose to act out of love rather than fear. Each act of surrender becomes a brick in the foundation of peace. Over time, you realize that your inner landscape has changed. The noise in your mind softens, your reactions become slower and steadier, and your heart begins to rest even while the world outside remains uncertain. Placing your burdens in God's hand doesn't remove responsibility, it reorders it. You still act, still plan, still face challenges, but you do so without the constant weight of dread pressing down on your chest. You stop trying to predict every outcome because you know that the outcome isn't what defines you. Your faith does. The more you live this way, the more you begin to understand that trust is not passive. It is one of the most active, deliberate choices you can make. It requires courage to let go of what you can't control and to step forward with grace in what you can. This kind of trust reshapes your entire being. It replaces anxiety with steadiness, chaos with clarity, and despair with quiet hope. It doesn't mean you stop feeling fear. It means fear no longer holds authority over you. You may still stumble, still grieve, still face uncertainty. But even then, you sense a hand greater than yours holding everything together. You begin to see that you were never alone, not for a single moment. Every burden you released, every tear you shed, every prayer you whispered was received by a presence far wiser and kinder than your understanding could grasp. And so, transformation unfolds, not through force but through surrender. You are no longer the person who fears every change or trembles before every challenge. You become someone who walks calmly through the unknown. Not because life is easy, but because you have learned who holds your life. In placing your burdens in God's hand, you are not losing control, you are finding alignment. You are aligning your will with divine wisdom, your effort with eternal purpose, your heart with peace. That is where the burdened soul becomes the trusting soul, and where the trusting soul finally becomes free.